population, which is about 5.5 million Sri Lankans, right, are supposed to be living in poverty as of this year, which is up from 11.3% in 2019. That's a huge, significant jump. If I said that 1.7 or 1.9 million people were on Samudri before, we ought to have seen a government response to this new 5.5 million or this jump. But what is being told to us is this Aswasuma program, which comes a year later, after 1 year of surviving the crisis on your own, that 2 million people will be on this scheme and get 2,500 rupees till the end of this year. It will reduce to 1.6 million people by March 2024. That will reduce to 1.2 million people thereafter. So even if we started with 1.9 million people on Samurdhi, we don't know then whether it's only 1.2 million people that is going to be left in the Aswasuma program. So these uncertainties create deep insecurities in people as to what their future is going to look like. And there was no special effort taken to look at particular categories, historically discriminated, newly vulnerable populations. And some people even said, particularly the urban poor communities had said that it feels like we are being penalized for having assets, because that was the part of the questionnaire, right? It says if you have an asset, then you are marked down. So it feels like even though we are trying to maintain assets and trying to work ourselves out into a better situation, now having an asset seems to be something that's held against you. So just that comparison. Country, so many more people fell into poverty, but the response is not just the same as before, but maybe even less than before. In terms of food insecurity, the World Bank statistics said that 1/3 of the population is food insecure now, which is 33% of the population. Look, if you just calculate that, it's about 7.2 million Sri Lankans, right? That's up from 9.2% in 2019. That is also a very significant jump. But we haven't seen a comprehensive program to address the food insecurity problem. We have been saying that in some of the recommendations that we've been putting out, we have been saying it's not just pricing, subsidizing food, but it's also making available and distributing food, giving food parcels as part, not only cash transfers, because a lot of the conversations about social protections became limited to this cash transfers question. Midday school meals programs have been affected. We know that several private parties have also become involved in just trying to respond to this need. And very recently, I think in this month, the government said that with bilateral support, they would increase the school midday meal program from 1.2 million to 2 million school children. Reportedly, there are 4.2 million school-going children in Sri Lanka. The income insecurity and cost of living, the actual purchasing capacity, and this is something that we picked up from Ahilan's article, 40 to 50%, the actual purchasing capacity has come down. So people aren't able to purchase what they were able to in the past. Households are becoming more and more in debt without any relief, and predatory microfinancing is on the increase as a result. Again, we have seen no meaningful response forthcoming on this issue. In fact, the more recent conversation has been about new labor laws and looking at some of the employers' recommendations. They are creating more insecurities for working class people, particularly when they are now thinking that their incomes are insecure and the cost of living has increased. When there are easier methods to hire and fire, when there is flexibility being introduced, your livelihoods become also insecure. So these conversations are real conversations that impact the lives of people, and we just want to raise that at this time. We know that there has to be more detailed study, more thoughtful responses, but there is a huge difference in the current response as it is. women are bearing the brunt of this. I know we keep saying it and we keep saying it and we keep saying it, right? But it is falling on deaf ears all the time. So women workers are the main contributors to Sri Lanka's economy, but they made that contribution facing this livelihood loss and income insecurity. They have been working for less than men. Their numbers have dominated the workforce in key sectors: migrant workers, garment factories, tea plantations. And it is their livelihoods that are currently insecure. There is union busting happening in the plantation areas. There is various job losses. Where people are being fired but also being put on. There is no work. So garment factories, they say that there is no work currently, so we are going to put you on a basic salary and keep you until we get work. But that basic salary is usually low, and that is real insecurity, so they have to then just leave and find other work. Women have been taking on additional care burden. So they were doing a care burden even before unpaid care work. Now they are doing even more of a care burden because of the economic crisis. So the pain of just having to organize around meals, to budget, to the stress that this causes in the family, and even if it leads to domestic violence, that is something that women are facing. Women are losing their personal assets and security. They are now pawning and losing their jewelry. So there's nothing also left. Some of the interviews, some of our colleagues were saying that they have lost their jewelry. There's nothing more left to pawn. They're also losing their properties by mortgaging. And women and girls are also sacrificing nutrition in their families. Increased costs of sanitary napkins, things like that are also means that girls are also missing out on school, which we have come to know. We are closing up and coming to the point that all these conversations about people's lives, right, about all these frustrations and all these difficulties that we've been talking about, the underlying sort of perception has been that these are all handouts that are given to low-income families to make sure that they are okay. But the idea of social protection is really a right. Coming from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it has been articulated as a right, and there is a reason for that. Because it is very much part of the economic policy, the economic program that a country has to ensure that the entire country is secure. It is universal in its approach. This is the way that we ensure that everyone is secure and protected, regardless of any one of us falling sick, any one of us sort of experiencing disability, losing our livelihood, losing our job. There are social protections in place for everybody. It's not only targeting low-income families. The low-income family support, and also something that working people are also a part of the social protection scheme, right, is to ensure that there is a minimum basic standard of living that is secure for individuals, so that there is nobody suffering in hunger, dying of not having health care, access to health care and things like that. So it says secure protection from a range of adverse circumstances, including a lack of work-related income, unaffordable access to health, insufficient family support, which is why when we have programs like free health and free education, it has meant so much that these programs were installed so long ago, and we still reap the benefits of that. We have failed to invest in those programs, certainly, and that is something that we may need to change. But we also need to guard against those programs being further deteriorated or even phased out. So social protection is a social and economic necessity. It is not something that is a charitable program run by the government. When we have money, we give. When we don't have money, we don't. It is for everybody's sake, so that we take everyone along with us. On the next slide, I have just put up, drawing a little bit on my strength, the constitutional principles that Sri Lanka has promised, right, as a country. we have the social contract with the people to say, of course, we have put it in this section called Directive Principles of State Policy, which means that we can't go to court and sort of file a case saying that this is a right? But the state has promised us in the Constitution, Sri Lanka pledges to establish a democratic socialist society with the objects of realizing by all citizens an adequate standard of living for themselves and their families. The country promises that, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, continuous improvement of living conditions, and the full employment of leisure, social, and cultural opportunities. It's a great idea. The important point at this time is, when we are in economic crisis, we may think this is a lot to give people, right? But we can't go backwards. We have achieved something, and we need to ensure that people are not falling off the wagon at this point. Sri Lanka also says that we shall eliminate economic social privilege and disparity and the exploitation of man by man or by the state. So when we are talking about workers' rights and we are talking about new labor laws and things like that, we really need to be careful in this context of whose interests are taking priority and whether it's leading to exploitation. The state shall ensure that the operation of an economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and the means of production to the common detriment. So we need to ensure that, or the state has promised that it will ensure that the economic system will not lead to a concentration of wealth and the means of production is then concentrated in one place to the detriment of the many millions and not just for the benefit of the few. And the country itself says that we shall ensure social security and welfare for Sri Lankans. So the last two slides are recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of them. We'll work that into the conversation as we have a discussion. And hopefully this has given us some food for thought to have that discussion moving forward. Thank you for your attention.